Trump announces the imminent end of the war, and Putin is ready to accept the US concept on Ukraine. Scandal? An American arms company has cheated Ukraine out of $1 billion. There is panic in the Kremlin. Dozens of Ukrainian drones are attacking Moscow. A dam has burst near Belgorod. Water is flooding the occupiers' positions. Because of this, Russian troops near Vovchansk were surrounded. Trump threatens the Kremlin with nuclear weapons. Russian authorities are sending conscripts en masse to the front. A plant is being built in Ukraine that will produce Gripen fighters. Lots of flamingos until the end of the year. Zelensky's sensational statement. Hello, my name is Anastasia Dmitrovskaya, and right now here are the main stories. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose touch with you across the vastness of YouTube. I have ended 8 wars and will soon end a 9th. Trump said this while speaking to the press aboard Air Force One. I have
the best ratings ever. I have ended 8 wars and the 9th is on the way. Russia and Ukraine.
In fact, Trump expressed confidence that he would be able to end the Russia-Ukraine war. Moreover, Trump is convinced that thanks to his peacemaking efforts, he now has the very best approval rating in the country in his entire life. And continuing on the topic of peace in Ukraine, the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Sergei Lavrov, stated that Putin is ready to accept, quote, the US concept on Ukraine and to move forward in practical terms. According to Lavrov, Putin allegedly confirmed his readiness to resolve the war based on this concept during the summit in Alaska, where one of the conditions was the so-called surrender of Donbass. However, according to Lavrov, Moscow did not receive a direct response from Washington to this proposal. Consequently, the parties agreed to take a pause to consider the proposal. But honestly, I have to admit, I get the feeling that these very parties are speaking different languages. At least that's how it looks right now. And what do you think? Could Donald Trump become a dove of peace in this war? Remember, just the other day, we reported that Russia conducted a test of a cruise missile with a nuclear engine. Burevestnik?
The Russian armed forces conducted a strategic offensive forces exercise was conducted, during which training and combat launches were carried out by all 3 components of the Russian Federation's strategic nuclear forces, as well as tests of advanced weapon systems.
So, Trump commented on Putin's statement about the Burevestnik test. I
don't think it's appropriate for Putin to do such statements. He should have ended the war, which was supposed to last 1 week. And now it's already approaching its 4th year. That's what he should be focusing on, not missile tests.
Trump also reminded that the US has a nuclear submarine off the coast of Russia.
They know that we have a nuclear submarine, the best in the world, right off their coast. So we don't need a missile to fly 8,000 miles. They're not playing games with us, and we're not playing games with them either. We constantly conduct missile tests, but as I said, we have a nuclear submarine. We don't need to shoot at such distances.
In short, as they say, our song is good. Start from the beginning. Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many people watch us from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the States. We, Ukrainians, are very grateful to you for your support and proud that we have such a reasonable audience. Write in the comments under this episode as well from which country you're watching us and whether people there support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments, and meanwhile we continue, because the most interesting part is still ahead. Meanwhile, the struggle continues on the front line. In the past 24 hours, there have been 118 clashes. The Russians also continue to heavily shell both border towns and more remote regions of Ukraine. But they keep suffering losses. 800 soldiers killed and wounded, 178 pieces of military equipment, and 547 drones. Among the destroyed equipment is the latest Russian Bukem 3 air defense system, with an estimated cost of $45 million.
All good, all good, all good. Keep flying. That was the altitude.
100 meters.
100 meters.
We're going in. Take that right now. Burn.
The enemy continues to press in Donbass. The Siversk-Lyman direction is under constant pressure.
On the approaches to Siversk, the enemy keeps methodically pushing, trying to get as close to the city as possible. The main focus is on small infantry assaults, without heavy equipment, more like reconnaissance by force. They advance in short bursts, but every time they come under heavy fire from our drones. Kamikaze and FPV drones strike every group that tries to move forward.
And as the soldier with the call sign Alex says, we are making progress in the Dobropoli direction.
Indeed, we have successes in the Dobropoli direction. It is possible to finally eliminate the encircled enemy units. So far, the trend there is not bad, but everything is far from ideal. After all, we need to save Pokrovsk. If Pokrovsk falls, Mirnograd will also fall. The pocket is quite large, and being there is not very pleasant. Logistics don't reach all areas, so even getting in there is already quite something. What a quest! And
in the Alexandrovka direction, in Yegorovka, enemy sabotage and reconnaissance groups are being cleared. This was shown by the 425th Separate Assault Regiment, Skala.
The village of Yegorovka, Dnipropetrovsk region. A large group of Russian infantry entered here. Assault groups from the Skala regiment set out to clear the area. The Russians stayed in the houses until the very end and did not reveal themselves, even when they saw our soldiers nearby. You are now seeing footage of the assault. The Russians were surrounded, pelted with grenades, and targeted with grenade launchers. And they were finished off in their shelters. They were hit with grenade launchers and finished off right in their cover.
Dozens of occupiers were eliminated.
Dozens of occupiers were destroyed both in the village itself and on its approaches. All enemy attempts to break out of the encirclement were repelled. Currently, there are no enemy forces in Yehorivka. After the clearing operation, fighters from the Skala regiment raised the Ukrainian flag in the village.
The situation in the Pokrovsk district remains consistently difficult. Pokrovsk is important to Putin, and as an occupier captured by our military told us, Putin ordered the Russians to capture Pokrovsk in the coming weeks, and he is not at all concerned about losses.
today, the bastards once again tried to break into Mirnorad with vehicles, but they burned up. The prisoner says that Putin gave the order to capture Pokrovsk by mid-November, so they won't spare manpower or equipment. And
all because Putin and Gerasimov have already announced the encirclement of Pokrovsk, which they still call by its old name Krasnoarmysk.
The military units of the 2nd and 51st Armies, advancing from converging directions, have completed the encirclement of the enemy in the area of Krasnoarmysk and Dimitrovo.
But even Russian war correspondents deny this fact and mock the lies of their leadership.
I turn on the TV. I wonder if I say that Gerasimov is raving about the encirclement of Krasnoarmysk and Dimitrovo. Will that be considered discrediting in the Russian Federation? Or are Gerasimov's words themselves discrediting in the Russian Federation? They've encircled them so well that there's almost 6 kilometers between the flanks.
Zelensky also denied this fact. He says it's a complete lie aimed at the US to create the impression of a Russian victory. But here's something. One thing the Russians definitely won't tell the Americans about is the shelling of Moscow. Last night, they deployed air defense systems all over the city because our drones were flying in. In total, up to 200 drones flew into Russia, with about 40 reaching Moscow. Of course, they claim that all of them were shot down as usual, but for some reason an oil depot near Moscow was on fire. We'll tell you what has happened on and around the front lines over the past day and what's happening right now in our report.
The Ukrainian armed forces are advancing on the enemy by leaps and bounds, at least by Kremlin standards, step by step. While Putin's army spends months fighting for every village, our defenders are achieving what once seemed impossible. In just one day, they managed to recapture as many as 3 Ukrainian villages from the Russian army. We're talking about the settlement of Sukitske and 2 more villages in the Pokrovsk direction, Kucherev Yar and Uyut.
Thus, as of August 21st, 2025, the situation in this area has been stabilized. Control has been restored over 9 settlements. Another 9 have been cleared of enemy sabotage groups. In just the last 10 days, 1,756 enemy soldiers have been eliminated here, and 75 units of enemy equipment.
The occupiers also suffered huge losses while attempting to break through the Ukrainian front on a neighboring section of the front line. For example, the fighters of the 33rd Brigade repelled a massive mechanized assault near Vladimirovka in the Donetsk region. During the battle, the weather conditions were poor, which did not work in the occupiers' favor. At least 3 armored vehicles got stuck in the swamp, and as the enemy infantry began to disembark from them, they came under fire from artillery and drones. At some point, even HIMARS joined in to repel the Russian attack. As a result of the battle, the enemy lost 3 armored vehicles destroyed, 3 drowned, and most of their infantry was wiped out. Nevertheless, the Russian army does not give up hope of breaking through our defenses. On any section of the front, at any cost, even if it means hundreds or thousands of their soldiers killed.
Every day, essentially, there is news that the armed forces have pushed the enemy back in one area or liberated territory in another. In all directions, they are basically repelling large-scale enemy attacks. Every day, dozens of attacks are carried out in various directions.
The enemy is especially desperate to push the armed forces of Ukraine out of Pokrovsk. Enemy sabotage groups are storming AFU positions there around the clock. They haven't stopped for the past several days. The situation in this area remains extremely difficult for the AFU. However, despite all the efforts of the enemy, our defenders courageously hold the line. Pokrovsk.
The defense of Pokrovsk has been holding for over a year. More than a year, think about it. Well, how many thousands of Russians died there? Losses exceed 200,000. These are the official confirmed losses according to figures from foreign intelligence agencies. Second option, how much Russian equipment? How much equipment have Russian generals lost in this direction? The generals have lost their epaulets.
The Pokrovsk direction is the main topic of conversation for Russian propaganda. But when it comes to their so-called achievements on other parts of the front, Kremlin propaganda tries not to talk about it. On TV across the border, they're unlikely to show this. Footage like this. Within minutes of detection, the border guards from the PLA Reconnaissance Strike Group of the Guard Brigade completely destroy another enemy position. As a result, the occupiers lost at least 2 of their tanks, a vehicle, an antenna, electronic warfare equipment, and a significant portion of their personnel in the southern Slobodansky direction. Despite all their efforts, the Russians have not managed to achieve a single significant victory, either on the ground or in the air. The only thing the occupiers are good at is creating weapons of mass terror against civilians. A vivid example of this, a barbaric raid on a wind farm near Kramatorsk. These are clearly civilian critical infrastructure facilities. In this way, the Russians destroyed a 3rd wind power station in Kramatorsk. Before this, the occupiers had attacked wind turbines on October 22nd and 24th. Endless air raids on Ukrainian cities may become the Kremlin's new tactic. For this purpose, Russia is actively testing more and more new types of its own drones. For example, UAVs with a ring wing. An unusual enemy drone was detected by a Ukrainian anti-aircraft drone. Its exact purpose has not yet been determined, but it is assumed that it could have performed both reconnaissance and strike missions. Overall, just in the past week alone, the enemy has sent toward Ukraine at least 1,200 UAVs, dropped more than 1,360 glide bombs, and used over 50 missiles of various types. Every Russian strike is an attempt to inflict as much harm as possible on ordinary life. This week, these are strikes on residential buildings, on our people, on children, on civilian infrastructure. This is the main target for the Russians. 1,000 strikes with different types of weapons in just 1 week. However, the Ukrainian response to Russian terror is also not far off, military analysts assure.
Ukraine was, is, and will be. And sooner or later, Ukrainian tomahawks will certainly, at some point, meet Russian decision-making centers.
While the American tomahawks are still on their way, the security service of Ukraine has shown off its own new upgrades.
We are handing over this remarkable Mogura B7, which has already achieved a number of victories.
The drone was purchased with donations from Ukrainians as part of a large-scale fundraising campaign, joined by local artists, influencers, and athletes.
This strike by a naval drone is the first in the world to have destroyed aerial targets.
Thanks to just one such naval drone, the occupiers can suffer colossal losses, which the SBU promises to report in its upcoming video updates.
I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They hold the front and stand against a massive horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine, and if you can't do so financially, write them words of encouragement in the comments. I know they're watching us.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Boats panic. Why are you doing this to us? In the Belgorod region, a dam burst, the one that was hit by the armed forces of Ukraine the day before. At first, it seemed to Russia that, aside from some damage, nothing else would happen, since until yesterday evening it was barely letting any water through. But later, nature made sure that Russians would feel karma for Kakhovka.
This is too big to pass, an exceptionally strong stream.
The water began to overflow its banks and flood the settlements downstream. Significant areas are already flooded, the water continues to spread, but the Russians are in no hurry to announce an evacuation. Governor Gladkov says that everything is under control and claims the water will quickly flow into the Kharkiv region. But there is one thing: Russian positions have started to get flooded. The units that crossed near Vovchansk found themselves cut off from the main forces. The Russians suffered heavy losses and some battalions have almost lost their combat readiness. The strike on the Belgorod reservoir was confirmed by the commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces.
The strike was carried out by the drones of the 1st Separate Center of Unmanned Systems Forces. The operation was named DAM. Well, hang in there just in case. But as can be seen from the follow-up reconnaissance, the dam was slightly damaged.
Those days, Russian war correspondents had already started shouting that a response would come soon, and they are calling to strike the Kyiv hydroelectric power plant to flood the capital.
Oreshnik, Burevestnik, Yar, Skinsal, and all of this right here. Let there be good.
So the Russian offensive is coming to a halt in the Kharkiv region. This is good for our military, who can take advantage of it. As for what the consequences will be, time will tell. A plant for assembling Swedish Gripen fighter jets may be opened in Ukraine. The publication Financial Times, citing the CEO of Swedish Defense and the company Saab, Mikael Johansson, reports that the company is ready to open a plant in Ukraine to assemble Gripen fighter jets.
It would be great to create facilities in Ukraine, at least for final assembly and testing, and possibly even for partial production, noted the head of Saab.
Johansson says that a potential deal with Ukraine would roughly double the company's production capacity needs. In addition, the CEO of Saab also touched on the issue of financing. He suggested using part of the frozen Russian assets to pay for the production of the aircraft. At the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, an American company from Arizona signed a contract to supply Ukraine with $1 billion worth of weapons. But the weapons have yet to arrive.
Have finally now arrived. Times. Despite having large storage facilities and experience with government-scale orders, firearms did not deliver a single round of ammunition to Kyiv.
A U.S. federal judge ordered the company to return the full amount of the advance payment to Ukraine, plus interest and legal costs, which amounts to more than 20 million euros in total. By attacking the energy sector, Russia is trying to make part of the country uninhabitable and provoke panic and mass emigration. The Economist writes that now Putin is acting more cynically and cruelly as he is unable to achieve his desired goals on the battlefield. Despite the development of Ukrainian air defense, particularly the emergence of interceptor drones, Russia is also rapidly modernizing its strike capabilities. For example, today Russian Shahed drones are significantly better than those the Russians used to strike Ukrainian energy infrastructure in 2022. It is also worth noting that this is, so to speak, Russia's new old tactic, which they are not using for the first time. But previous experience has shown that massive attacks on Ukraine's civilian population did not cause panic, but rather anger. So here, as they say, he miscalculated. Well, where is it? Putin needs more cannon fodder at the front, given the colossal losses in his army. But he doesn't even hesitate to deceive and force completely inexperienced Russian conscripts into the war. This scheme is something that conscripts and their families should pay special attention to. Coming up next.
My fellow countrymen, all of them could be walking around right now. Talking, doing things. They could have had more children. In short, they could have brought real and significant benefit to their fellow citizens in their daily lives.
More than 1 million losses in the Russian army since 2022. The cemeteries are overflowing, contract payments have been reduced, and commanders are stealing the funeral payouts. Over the past 2 years, the number of contract signings in the Russian Federation has dropped to a minimum. Pokrovsk has been under assault for a year now at the cost of enormous losses. So where are they getting new people for Putin's war? A scheme for covert mobilization has been uncovered in Russia. The Russian Ministry of Defense has resorted to extreme measures. They're sending young people to the slaughter.
We signed the contract on July 5th, 2025, under psychological pressure from Junior Lieutenant Dasha Dorjieva. He was the one who intimidated us, saying that if we stayed on conscription, we would be sent to Kursk. And in Kursk, if conscripts are sent to Kursk, only 70% of them come back, while 30% die there.
Conscription is covert mobilization. Today in Russia, conscripts are becoming a significant force that the authorities are throwing into the so-called special military operation.
There are people from my draft, my friends, who were wounded, shell-shocked, killed, heads blown off by shrapnel or decapitated.
Cases of conscripts being forced to sign military contracts continue. One of them was Andrei Smirnov.
The 50th Separate Railway Brigade declares that they do not want to sign a military contract. If a contract appears with my signature, I was forced to sign it. Signed under psychological or physical pressure. Or through fraudulent means.
195,000 rubles were deposited into his bank card. It turned out that this was the first payment under a contract which, as it turned out, had been drawn up in his name. Smirnov claims that the document itself was handwritten and signed by someone else. Other young men, however, can't withstand the psychological pressure from their commanders who try to convince them to agree to go to war instead of returning home to their families.
He said that basically no one would be waiting for me at home, my friends would all disappear. My parents, on the contrary, would just send me off to work. No one would look after me or care for me, that I wouldn't be needed by anyone, that's how it would be.
They are beaten, deprived of sleep, and cut off from contact with their loved ones. In some cases, those who refused were even shot at with air guns.
Contracts are signed on behalf of conscripts without telling them. They are already formally ranked. Officially, contract soldiers are sent to war. I'm not saying this without evidence. This year there was a major scandal in Chebakul in the Chelyabinsk region, a well-known military unit where the prosecutor's office itself, under pressure from appeals by relatives, concealed and then admitted that there had been falsifications by the command to force conscripts to sign contracts.
Bringing in conscripts allows contract soldiers and mercenaries to be freed up for new offensives.
They're only 18 years old, they have no combat experience, they don't even have any real-life experience yet. How can they help at the front? In
Russian military units, there is an unofficial plan to recruit contract soldiers from among the conscripts.
We have evidence of people being put into scorching hot drying rooms and kept there for a long time until they agreed to sign a contract. People from Kuzbas told me that one conscript managed to resist such pressure and was able not to sign the contract. But at what cost? His femoral head was broken and he was discharged early from the army. So he didn't sign the contract, but he was left disabled. And yet people consider this case a success. These are the kinds of successes we have.
The mother of another Russian conscript said that her son signed a contract for military service after he was pressured into it.
He explained to me, he said, like, Mom, I don't even understand myself how it happened. I never wanted to sign a contract.
When he submitted a report about refusing the contract, they didn't accept it and claimed that signing the contract was voluntary. In Primorsky Krai, for refusing to sign a contract, conscripts are set upon by other servicemen, subjecting them to collective
The authorities have decided on a punishment for him. They want to send him to what is called the Special Military Operation, which is a serious and dangerous assignment. This is especially concerning because the child is only 18 years old, having just reached adulthood and lacking experience with such grave matters. It is important to note that he did not sign up for this willingly. He signed the documents involuntarily under pressure and not of his own free will. This coercion was against his will. He had no intention and did not want to sign this contract. He was told, "You have no choice, you'll sign it anyway."
His mother didn't know that her son had been taken to war. He thought he would end up in a security unit, but he ended up in Mariupol.
We don't know where our son is right now. At the moment, we have messages, screenshots with him, audio recordings, video recordings, conversations where he confirms that he signed the contract under pressure against his will.
Currently, conscription into the Russian army is taking place in annexed Crimea.
You are now joining the proud and honorable ranks of the brave and dedicated defenders of our motherland with honor and pride.
Conscripts, both from Russia and from the occupied territories, are forced to sign a military contract within the first months of service so that there is a legal basis to send them to war. In addition, law enforcement uses conscript soldiers in battalions for shooting down drones.
To the front in Crimea. So here we are, conscripts flying around serving, basically in Yalta, guys, conscripts, Looks like 3 were killed and 16 wounded. Just conscripts. Those drones came in. And here too, they fly around pretty often, bro. And can you believe it? The guys are shooting down drones, and they don't even get paid for it. Can you imagine? Even though they said, if you shoot down drones, you'll get paid well.
The number of yesterday's conscripts who become contract soldiers and are sent to war, according to human rights activists, is classified.
About 300,000 people are drafted for compulsory military service each year. But even if a third of them sign a contract, that's about 100,000 new contracts. This is a kind of forced recruitment, and it goes on all the time.
The Russian Ministry of Defense, in order to fulfill Putin's order, is plugging holes at the front with 18-year-old guys. But no one can help them avoid this. After all, Putin isn't even trying to stop the bloody slaughter. The European Union remains the world's largest buyer of Russian gas. This was reported by The Guardian.
According to Cray, the EU remains the largest buyer of Russian LNG, purchasing half of all Russian LNG exports. It is followed by China with 22% and Japan with 18%. This bloc is also the largest buyer of pipeline gas, purchasing 35% of Russian pipeline gas. It is followed by China with 30% and Turkey with 29%.
As for specific amounts, for example, in September 2025, the largest importers of Russian gas in the EU were Hungary with 393 billion euros and Slovakia with 207 billion euros. But there is also good news. Last week, the EU agreed to completely stop importing Russian gas, including LNG, by the beginning of 2027.
Some European countries managed to find a way to stop Russian imports almost immediately. This should have happened 3 years ago. Of course, we should hold India and China accountable, but we should also pay attention to our own actions.
Well, as they say, you can't add or take away from that. American sanctions are nothing to worry about, says Putin, but Donald Trump counters judge their effect in 6 months. Even though the Kremlin is putting on a brave face, it is urgently sending its chief negotiator, Kirill Dmitriev, to Washington, who is doing everything he can to smooth over the negative relationship with the White House. This is because, in front of the whole world, Putin continues to string him along regarding ending the war in Ukraine. Next, we'll discuss what's happening on the main political platforms that influence the Russian-Ukrainian war.
The US is imposing sanctions which, according to the Kremlin, do not scare them. And Putin's special envoy immediately sets off on an American tour to appease the overseas gentleman.
I believe that Russia, the US, and Ukraine are actually quite close to a diplomatic solution. President Zelensky has taken a major step by acknowledging that this is about the front line.
No matter how much the Russian leadership tries to publicly play up the lie that sanctions are only beneficial for Russia, Donald Trump, he holds a different opinion, believing that the new sanctions will cause Russia irreparable damage within the next 6 months.
Today, Putin stated that Russia is invulnerable to US sanctions and that they will not affect the Russian Federation's economy. I'm glad he thinks so. That's good. Let's see what happens in 6 months.
Furthermore, according to Donald Trump, due to the sanctions, China is already reducing its purchases of Russian black gold, and India is completely refusing to buy it at all.
Because of this clause regarding secondary sanctions, and without a clear list of legal entities, there was an immediate reaction, for example, in China, where they temporarily suspended purchases of Russian energy resources. Well, of course, most likely they will resume. One way or another, they will find a way. There are safe and reliable ways to do it, but right now, at this moment, many people are still wary of Trump's decisive and firm stance, who is really aiming, if not to end the Russia-Ukraine war entirely, then at least to halt the ongoing active hostilities.
The American sanctions against Russian oil giants Lukoil and Rosneft have stirred things up. The Kremlin's viper's nest.
A sanction strike against the Russian Federation. A very tangible potential. The Kremlin understands this perfectly well, and so does Putin himself. This was evident from his noticeably nervous reaction related to the toilets. He tried to make some awkward jokes, but even with his somewhat clumsy and bumbling demeanor, it was clear that this was a real blow to him.
Following Trump's decision to impose sanctions and also cancel the meeting with Putin in Budapest, the Russian dictator tried once again to deceive Trump. And at the same time as the ongoing strikes on civilian targets in Ukraine, kindergartens, residential buildings, and critical infrastructure, the bunker dweller hypocritically declared that dialogue is better, the continuation of the war.
He is talking about postponing this meeting. What can be said? Dialogue is always better than any kind of confrontation, any disputes, or especially war. According to
information from the Wall Street Journal, the imposed sanctions are not the strongest possible blow to the Kremlin from the White House. The US president chose a medium level of severity for the sanctions against Russia.
Why did Trump reach a boiling point in his relationship with Putin? The US president was offered 3 options for sanctions, after his patience with the Kremlin over the war in Ukraine ran out.
According to the publication, the harshest sanction option targets Russian industry and the top leadership of the aggressor country. And if the Kremlin does not accept Washington's terms in the near future, the US president may continue and intensify the pressure he has begun.
Western media say that the focus should be on the Christmas date in order to, let's say, give a serious impetus to the negotiation process to try to stop active hostilities in the Russian-Ukrainian war before Christmas. This window of opportunity exists right now, and both Ukraine, the US, and European partners are actively working on it. Everyone is. Within the anti-Putin coalition, they are trying to strengthen Trump, and Trump in turn is being strengthened by the positions of the others. And indeed, there is a chance to suspend hostilities before Christmas.
On October 30th, during his visit to Asia, Trump will meet with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. The White House has confirmed that one of the topics of discussion will be the war in Ukraine and Russian energy resources. The outcome of this meeting will determine the future course of negotiations.
The government order for Flamingo missiles, despite delays in funding from partners, will be fulfilled by the end of the year. Zelensky reported this in a phone conversation with TSN host Ala Mazur.
There was a technical issue at the Flamingo production facility. There is a delay in funding from partners, which is being resolved. But the main thing, according to Zelensky, is that the government order will be fulfilled by the end of the year. Ukraine has found its own resources for funding and will have a certain number of missiles, the exact number of which is not being disclosed. Moreover, everyone is satisfied with how the missiles that have already been launched performed, says Zelensky.
Flamingo, let me remind you, is a Ukrainian cruise missile, the serial production of which became known in August of this year. Ukraine is now actively using this missile to strike deep into Russia. Lithuania will close its border with Belarus for an indefinite period due to meteorological balloons carrying smuggled cigarettes launched from Belarus.
Prime Minister Inga Rugin said that the reason was repeated incidents. Over the past week, the country's airports have been closed 4 times due to weather balloons containing contraband cigarettes launched from Belarus, leading to the cancellation of more than 140 flights.
Lithuania temporarily closed its border with Belarus overnight, while the government will discuss whether to close the border for a longer period. October 29th. Genians
emphasized that this is a clear signal to Belarus that hybrid attacks will not be tolerated. In addition, starting Monday, the Lithuanian armed forces will take all necessary measures to shoot down these balloons. Lithuania will also hold consultations with its NATO allies and consider an additional package of sanctions against Belarus.
How do you like our news? Let us know what we should change to become better, and we will definitely take it into account. In the meantime, give this video a like to support what we do, and be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss our next episodes. See you!